All right, new revelations in what is being described as the biggest COVID financial fraud scheme in the country, turning it from now taxpayers to terrorism. Members of the Somali community in Minnesota may have been funneling taxpayers' money to Shabaab. That's a terror organisation and an al-Qaeda affiliate based in Somalia. For more on this, we're going to be joined now by retired Chief of the Yuma Sector Border Patrol, Chris Clem, and former Task Force Officer Brian Stahl. We're also joined by our special guests, Jenny Beth Martin and Doug Burns in studio as well. Welcome to you all.
Yeah, welcome, guys. Now, we know U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he announced this investigation into whether $1 billion of American taxpayers' money in Minnesota were actually directed to al-Shabaab. Chris, was the U.S. taxpayer money diverted to Islamic terrorists or not?
Well, the information we have right now is indicating all signs point to yes. I can tell you just during my first 100 days of this current administration, it was an all hands on deck. It was every U.S. law to claw back, number one, abused and fraudulent taxpayer benefits going to people that aren't entitled to them, but also on the enforcement, whether it was immigration or any kind of tax evasion or any other kind of laws like that. We're seeing this play out right now. And now you add this whole mix of funneling to a terrorist organization. Look, there's a reason why we say border security and immigration enforcement is national security. I don't want to broad brush any religion or race or nationality, but specifically this group has caused a problem, and it's worth looking into.
Governor Tim Walz, though, gave a non-response, to be honest, when he was asked about this. Take a look at this.
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
I agree with him there to an extent. You cannot blame the actions of, you know, for example, like we've seen in Israel, you can't hate every Israeli because of what Benjamin Netanyahu does. But that was okay, though, when it was the Jews, but now when it's the Somalis, it's not okay. This is the problem that I am having. And it has become a huge problem to the fact that we're even seeing, you know, Representative Ilhan Omar may have had some connection because she was very connected to the people who were doing this exact crime. So, Brian, why is Governor Walz just turning a blind eye to this when there is so many fingers pointing into the direction that this corruption was right in front of them the whole time?
You know, it's a great question. And, you know, I tend to agree with you, too. You don't want to blame an entire community. However, when you have a large portion of a community committing violent crimes and they are, you know, defrauding the taxpayers and the American people of billions of dollars, and that's something that you have to focus on. And it's not really painting with a broad stroke, but it's actually enforcing the laws that we have and trying to stop all of the fraud that's happening and the abuse and the criminal acts and the gangs. And it just happens to be that, you know, those kind of people are involved in that. And that's what we're focusing on right now.
Well, for sure, Jenny Beth, we know Tim Walz didn't do enough to prevent it. He was the governor. These funds were certainly transferred to the states. It was his duty to the taxpayers to protect these dollars. I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole Somali fraud, terrorist connection story?
There were whistleblowers from the Department of Human Services in Minnesota that came forward. They said they were trying to warn Governor Walz of the problem, and he didn't stop it. $1 billion isn't just a mistake. This is a deliberate criminal activity. It's a criminal enterprise, and ignoring it and allowing it to go on makes you complicit in the crime.
Yeah, well, we do know Kristi Noem said up to 50% of Somali visas could be fraudulent. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fred responded on CNN. Take a listen and we'll get you in here, Doug. Sure.
The Somali community is almost universally American citizens. They have come here legally. They are in our city legally. They've been here in many cases for decades, and they have contributed greatly to the fabric of who we are. They're part of our family here in Minneapolis. I mean, they are our banker, they are our babysitter, you know, in my family. To just go after a whole community indiscriminately, it's unconstitutional.
I mean, Doug, he's saying that the scrutiny on these visas is unconstitutional. Walk me through where in the Constitution he comes up with that argument.
Who said they're going after people indiscriminately? They're going after them based on specific facts, obviously. So they're bringing particular prosecutions for fraud. I mean, I was a federal prosecutor 9 years. Program fraud, government fraud is a huge, huge problem. It always is. Multiply that by 10 when you're talking about in an emergency or a pandemic, because there's just that much more opportunity for fraud. But again, you know, it's the same thing I always say, is mixing politics and law. So there he is, overgeneralizing like crazy. You know, you're going after an entire group indiscriminately. No, that's not correct. But I was glad to see Sarah obviously agree with Waltz, because so do I. You don't want to paint with a broad brush and say everybody's terrible.
Exactly right. But, you know, it doesn't mean everyone is terrible, but there are some bad eggs that have proven themselves. And that is what needs to be looked at here. We not need to frame everything as a racist conspiracy. Exactly.
Right.
All right, we do have to leave it there, though, unfortunately. Good conversation. Chris, Brian, appreciate you coming on. Jenny, Beth and Doug, thank you for sticking around.
Sure.